Right. So, we are going to look into a slightly different type of algorithms now. We are going to move more from the textual representation of algorithms to more pictorial representations of algorithms, as is what we see when we move into the domain of graph algorithms. Now, the graph theory, for example, is a course which is very popular in the computer science department, typically attended by almost all the students, though it is an elective. And there is a general perception that it is useful for computer science. But when I ask one of the students at the beginning of the class that why do you think graph theory, which is a subject which comes from mathematics, is of any use to a computer scientist? Why should computer scientists study the properties of graph at all? So, then there are all kinds of answers, and probably a mixture of them are all correct. So, what is your feeling? Why do we study graph theory? Why do we want to learn about properties of graphs? Yes. So, people are saying that real world problems, they can map into graphs, right? But how does that help us? I mean, we can map a real world problem into a graph, but then where does it lead us to? For most real world problems today, the size of the graphs will be so big that you cannot hope to draw them in any paper or any even using a CAD tool you cannot draw them. Like for example, if you think of integrated circuit where the wires are being routed from one part of the chip to other, that is a huge number of wires, and if you just see a picture of that, you can't make out what is connected to what, right? So, though the notion of graphs emanated from a long time ago, where people thought that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So, if you draw something and try to understand the concept behind that from that pictorial representation, then it becomes easier to understand that. That is how graph theory was born, probably. But today, when you look at graphs, that visual is not the reason why we need to study graph theory, because in any case most of these will be handled by algorithms, automated algorithms, and they will work on graphs which we cannot hope to draw or visualize in a very easy way, at least certainly not in a pictorial way. So, there is a nice picture which is here. Okay, so before I start with that, these are the resources that we will be using here. I will share these slides with you, so you don't need to take it down. There are these nice slide sets which, as Professor Chakraborty mentioned in his first lecture, that we have taken permission from the authors of this book and slide sets, and of course, you are free to use them in your courses, and they are very, very well made slides. Though for this course, because it is a course where we are not going to talk about algorithms, but about how to teach algorithms. So, I am not actually using those slides, but you can use it in your courses. And then there is the other book which we will use, not so much for the first lecture, but certainly for the next lecture. So, here is one reason why graph theory has become so popular in a wide variety of computer and computer science related domains. So, you see that there are graphs which come from chemistry. For example, this is a structure of something called benzocyclobutadiene. Then this is a social network where the vertices are people and the edges could be that whether they are Facebook friends or not. Then the third one is a protein structure where you have these various components of the protein molecule, and then these are the bindings between them. or the interactions in a protein network. So what does that mean? So we know that when something happens in our body, there are certain proteins which are secreted, and they can actually lead to the expression of certain genes, leading to the secretion of other proteins, and so on and so forth. So those can also be modeled as graphs, and that also may give some structure like this. Now for a mathematician, you know, the mathematician just looks at the structure and says that they are all the same. I mean, for me, this picture, and this picture, they all look alike, right? So I would like to study that what are the properties of these structures, so that whatever algorithms I build, whatever I develop, they are equally applicable in all of these domains. So that is the thing that we have to understand, that when we learn graph algorithms, it is not just sufficient to know that, okay, let there be a graph G equal to V comma E, and then this is what we want to do on the graph. Important thing to understand is that we do this because we feel that cutting across disciplines, we should be able to reduce problems into these fundamental structures and then solve them in the same way, right? That is why it becomes important from a core perspective in computer science. So we start with the simple definition of a graph. A graph is a relation. We know that it's a discrete structure, a relation where it's a relation from V cross V. That is, we can say that the set of edges is a subset of the relation V cross V. And for an undirected graph, this is a symmetric relation in the sense that if I have an edge from V1 to V2, then I also have an edge from V2 to V1. That's the same edge. And the only difference in directed graphs is that now it is an ordered set of tuples. That is, I may have an edge from V1 to V2, but that doesn't mean that I have an edge from V2 to V1. Right? This I have already talked about. So let me move on. Let's start with an example. That here is a table which talks about several duty hour slots, and I want to employ a bus driver for the period 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if I hire somebody from 9 to 1, that is 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., then the cost of that is 300 rupees. I have to pay that driver 300 rupees. If I hire that person from 9 to 11, then I have to pay 180 rupees and so on. Right? Now, I want to have a driver for the entire period 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It is not necessary that at every point of time there is exactly one driver. There could be a time where one driver is idle and I am using the other one. But I want to do this with the smallest possible cost. I want to minimize the total money that I have to pay for having some driver at my disposal from 9 to 5. So because this is a graph lecture on graph algorithms, obviously this is reducing to some graph problem. Can you tell me which problem? What will be the graph? What problem will I solve in it? Shortest path. What will be the nodes of the graph? Hours, right? So let us try to do it. So that part is easy, that my nodes of the graph will be the hours. So let's say I take 9. Right? Now I look at this. So from 9 to 1, I can hire a driver, and what is the cost of this? 300, right? From 9 to 11, 180. From 12 to 5, then 12 to 3, one to 4, and 2 to 5. And 4 to 5, 90, right? Yes. Is that all? And then I solve the shortest path problem on this graph. Yes? But is that guaranteed to be the best solution? So the one you are saying 9 to 1, 1 to 4, 4 to 5. Is that better, or having one driver from 9 to 1 and another from 12 to 5? See? Take one driver from 9 to 1, take another driver from 12 to 5. Then what do we do? How do we, is this then not the shortest path problem? Or can you maybe make some slight changes in the graph so that it does become a shortest path problem, including the thing that we want, that we should allow? Yes? 11 to 12, how will that help? Any idea how we can tweak this graph a little bit so that it? Yes, that's right, very good. Zero cost connections in the reverse side. So let me draw it with a different color. So what I want here is basically, I want an edge like this, right, and a cost of 0 on this. So now you see, I can take the 9 to 1, right, then 1 to 12, and then 12 to 380. That gives me the path that I really am looking for. But then I don't know that this is the only one that I will need. So what I need to provide for going back along these nodes, or back in time rather, using zero cost edges. And it suffices if I put all these edges, because now I can go from any vertex back in time at zero cost. Right? I will probably not put from 5 to 4, because if I have reached 5, then there is no point of going back in time anymore. Now do you see that solving the shortest path problem on this one is actually going to give you the minimum cost for hiring drivers, right? So the takeaway from this is that sometimes it may not exactly fit into the kind of problem that you want it to, but you can tweak it a little bit this way, that way, and that is the thing that is probably as important as learning the algorithms like Dijkstra's algorithm or any other algorithm, which will finally help you to solve the problem. Moving on, let's take a look at another problem, a very pertinent problem in our campus and I believe in many other campuses. Reallocation of housing. So, it is not the initial allocation problem, it is not the initial place where people apply for getting a house and then they are assigned to that is an assignment problem. Here people are already staying in certain houses, right, and these houses have different types of attributes. Some house may have a garage, different houses may have different number of bedrooms, and the rents of different houses may be different, and therefore, the houses may be classified into a set of types T1 through Tk depending on what kind of combination of attributes they have, right. Now, certain people are staying in certain types of quarters and now people want to change. Why do they want to change? Because their requirements have changed. Some of the young people have started having their family, they are having more children, now they want more bedrooms, so on and so forth. Some older people, their children have already graduated and gone over to some other places. Now they do not want a 5-bedroom apartment, they want to scale down. And now we want to find out that how to relocate these people. Now obviously, somebody can move into some quarter if either that quarter is empty or exchange for pair may be an option, but a more general thing would be, yes, exchange would mean that person A goes to person B's house and person B goes to person A's house. That if you are lucky that might happen, but it may also happen that A goes to B's house, B goes to C's house and C goes to A's house, right. So, then what is the underlying graph problem here? So, let us say that I will say types of vertices, types of quarters are my vertices. So, I have a type Ti of quarter and there is a type Tj of quarter. If somebody staying in Ti wants to shift to Tj, then I put a arrow, an edge from Ti to Tj, right. So, in this way I can now get a graph where and then when will I actually be able to do something about this? When I get a cycle. When I get a cycle, why Hamiltonian cycle? I do not have to satisfy everyone, right, and everyone might not be interested in changing houses, right. There might be some vertex, some type of quarter Tk which no one wants. There are always such types of quarters, right. So, there is no edge going into Tk. So, it is not Hamiltonian cycle. But if you find a cycle in the graph, any cycle, then what does that mean? Suppose if I look at this cycle, what does that mean? What does that tell us? That no, not all are satisfied. There are very unhappy people here, like this person will be very unhappy to note that these people now are able to shift. This person goes here, somebody from this type goes here, somebody from this type goes here and so on. but this person is left out, right. But when you get a cycle, you know that I can actually shift people. But now there are very practical questions. Suppose there are multiple cycles, which one do you want to give? Shortest cycle, longest cycle, multiple cycles, right? So many problems. Now I can give justifications for each of them. Shortest cycle, because think of physically people moving from one apartment to another. If I have a cycle of size 20, how many months will that take? Because one person has to vacate and next person has to move, right? It's not like you have that Aladdin's this thing who will just port everything when you ask, right? So you might want a shortest cycle, but if you go for a longest cycle, now from a theoretical point of view, these have very different complexities. Finding a shortest cycle has some complexity, finding the longest cycle is a problem where you can probably reduce Hamiltonian cycles into it and show that there is no, it is an NP complete problem to decide whether there is a cycle of a certain length, right. And therefore, finding out the longest cycle is an NP hard problem in general, right. So, this is just to give you glimpses of problems and then show that with minor this way, that way, these problems can have completely different complexities. So, when we are looking at path finding problems, path or cycle finding problems, so there are various levels at which we ask these questions. First is there a path from S to T, which is a reachability question, right? And you won't believe how many papers are published every year still on this reachability question, because we have to deal with graphs of very large size, and that problem is hardly solved. For small graphs, Dijkstra's algorithm or transitive closure we can do, but for graphs with 2 to the power of 300 vertices, not so easy. What is the minimum cost path from S to T? That is another type of question that we might ask. But then what do we mean by minimum? Now, that depends on the nature of edge costs, like there can be positive, negative edge cost, or the edge cost may be integers or reals, complexity may vary on that. Path cost may be defined in various ways, like I can talk about the sum of the edge costs, or the product of the edge costs, or the minimum of the edge costs, and so on and so forth. We will see that in the general framework, if we vary these things, you get different problems which you already know, and then the complexities of solving them is also different. And we have to understand how does the basic problem change with changing these attributes of the problem. That is the insight that we will hope to get, and that if you can pass on to the students, they will tomorrow if they come across a new variant of the problem, they will be able to solve it. So, let us look at one or two examples, so that we get into this kind of a understanding. So, we start with a problem which is called the equipment replacement problem. So, the problem is as follows, that a factory must periodically replace its equipment. So, there is some machine that it has, it must periodically replace it, and it may because the machine, as you use it over the years, it depreciates. So, at some point of time when I sell it back, then I look at the following things. I define CJK as the cost of buying an important machine at the beginning of year j. We buy it at the beginning of year j, plus I operate the machine from the year j to the year k minus 1, and when I sell it off at the beginning of year k, what is the salvage cost that I get. So, that is my Cjk, right. Now, I want to find a way to keep a machine with me for a period say 1 to n, and I want to figure out that how to do that. Now, this looks very similar to that bus driver problem, right. There also there was a time period over which I wanted a driver. Here there is a time period over which I want to have a machine operational, right. So, is this a shortest path problem? So, let us see. Yeah. So, let us do it over a 4-year horizon. So, this is year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, right. And these are my Cjks. So, the cost of this is C1 2, cost of this is C2 3, this is C3 4, and then I also have these edges. This is C1 4, C1 3 and C2 4, right. And then I can write down my recursive formulation as follows, that I write Qjk is equal to the minimum cost of having a machine from okay. Then what can I write recursively? Q1 n equal to minimum and I will vary from 2 in general. So, now if I find the shortest path from the node 1 to node n, that gives me a plan for keeping a machine at all times. What is the difference of this one with the previous one? Here we want exactly one machine at all times. So, if I want to get another machine, I will sell this one and buy a new one, because I am going to physically place 2 machines on my plant. No, one will be there and I will sell that and buy the next one. Whereas, in the bus driver problem, we could have 2 drivers also at the same time, which is why we had those reverse edges, but here it is not so. So, this is definitely shortest path. Now, look at a slight variant of this problem, where we want to do an investment. So, we are given a set of investment options for the next 10 years. Each investment option is a tuple of the form y_dr, where y is the year in which the investment is made, d is the duration for which the investment is made, and r is the profit which is received at the end. Now, what I want to do is I want to invest the money, but after every maturity I just want to invest the principal amount once again, not the entire amount. Suppose that is the problem. Now, will a graph very similar to this, the one that I had drawn earlier? Can I have this one, please? Yes. Now, if I look at these as the investment options, that if I invest the money from the first year to third year on a policy, then this is my return, and so on and so forth. Then what do I want to do? I want to find a path which maximizes my profit. So, what problem is it? Yes, somebody said that. Longest path, right? How hard is the longest path problem? How hard is the problem of finding a longest path from one vertex to another? In general, finding a longest path from one vertex to another is NP hard problem. And NP complete problems are all decision problems, NP hard problem. And we will, when we look at combinatorial optimization, we will come back to that part. But what about this problem? This problem has, this graph has a very special structure, for which that problem is not NP hard. Can you tell me what is the structure that this graph has? This is a very special type of graph. Yes, there is no cycles. It is a directed acyclic graph, right? It is a directed acyclic graph. And for directed acyclic graphs, we can use an algorithm very much like Dijkstra's to find out what is the longest path between a pair of vertices. Now, we will dive into Dijkstra's and see that for what type of problems can we use it and for what type of problems we cannot use it. No, the philosophy of Dijkstra's, not Dijkstra's per se. So, let us quickly recapitulate what we know about Dijkstra's algorithm. So, we start, suppose we want to find out the shortest path from the vertex S. This one is not writing. Anyway, it does not matter. So, we want to find out the path from S to T, right? Actually, Dijkstra's algorithm will find the shortest path tree, that is the shortest path from S to every other vertex. So, one way to look at it is that we start with a list called open. Initially, we put the S vertex in open. Then in each iteration, we find out the minimum cost node in open, freeze its cost, and then update the costs of all their neighbors, right. So, we start with this iteration where open is S and its cost is 0. In the first iteration, I will freeze the value of S, then I will look at its children, that is 1 and 2. What values do they have? 1 has the cost of 2 and 2 has the cost of 8. Now, out of these two, the lower cost one is the vertex 1. So, in the next iteration, I freeze the value of vertex 1, right, at 2. Then I look at the neighbors of the vertex 1, that is 2 only, and then I see that does it update the cost of 2 by adding this the 2 plus 3, that is 2 plus 3 and 8 which was already there. Now, 2 plus 3 is 5 and that is less than 8. So, this gets updated to 2, 5. Now, in the next iteration, I pick up this one, and then that this is updated. So, you all know Dijkstra's, right? So, this is how we go on. Now, this algorithm relies on what is called the optimal substructure property, which is something which is fundamental to dynamic programming. But this per se does not look like a dynamic programming algorithm, right? Though there is a connection between Dijkstra's and dynamic programming, which is also reported in a paper which appeared much later after Dijkstra's algorithm. Though when Dijkstra had proposed this algorithm, he did not want to establish any connection with dynamic programming. It is more like a greedy algorithm which is guaranteed to give you the optimal solution. But the optimal substructure property is something with which this algorithm uses. What does the optimal substructure property mean? What does it mean? So, yes, so every sub part of the solution will also be an optimal solution of that sub problem. In the context of shortest path, what does it mean? If I take a shortest path from a vertex S to a vertex T, and in that shortest path, if I have two vertices I and J,
then the distance between S to 4 in this subgraph,
yes,
the distance between S and 4 is minimum.
Distance between any two vertices in that path will also be minimum, will also be shortest.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is very easy to see, because if it was not the case, then I could have taken the alternative path from that vertex I to J and further reduce the cost of the shortest path. Now, the moment we get to a problem where this optimal substructure property does not hold, then we have a problem with using Dijkstra's algorithm. Now, to start with, let us look at the problem, let us revisit the problem of finding a longest path. Now, in a longest path, the optimal substructure property may not hold in general. And to see that, let us take a very simple graph like this, that I have 1, suppose this is a graph, and I want to find out the longest path between 1 and 2. So, what is the longest path between 1 and 2? The longest path between 1 and 2 is this one, right? Now, take any two vertices on this path, say this and this. So, is this the longest path from 5 to 4? No. So, the sub part of the longest path is not necessarily the longest path between those two vertices, right. So, the optimal substructure property does not hold, right. Let us see another example where we will have a problem here. So, I have this problem with negative costs. Suppose I have a -4 as a cost sitting here. Now, what will happen when I first look at S and its children? I will first freeze the value of S, then I will get the value of 1, cost of 1 as 8 and the cost of 2 as 6, right. Then out of these two, if I follow Dijkstra's algorithm, I will pick up the one which has lesser cost, that means node 2, and I will freeze its cost, right. Now, that is where I am making a mistake, because actually the value of the shortest path from S to 2 has actually a lesser cost, because this 8 plus minus 4 gives me a cost of 4, right. And that is why at this point my choice of freezing the value of the cost of 2 was not correct. Can you tell me where am I violating the optimal substructure property here? Why does negative costs violate the optimal substructure property? Yes? See, optimal substructure property for shortest path means what? It means that in a shortest path from a vertex to another vertex, if I find the shortest path and I take any two intermediate vertices and I find that the path from that vertex to this between these two intermediate vertex is not actually the shortest one, then the optimal substructure property is violated. So, I hope this would write, but this is not writing. Okay, the mouse will work. This thing does not work. The mouse is more robust. Right. So, now see, if you look at the shortest path from S to 1, right. What is the shortest path from S to 1? This is the shortest path, right. Okay. Now, this shortest path from S to 1 has two parts, S to 2 and 2 to 1. Let us look at the S to 2 part. Is this the shortest path from S to 2? No, because the shortest path from S to 2 is actually this one. So, that is where the optimal substructure property is violated, and because it is violated, we cannot, I mean Dijkstra's algorithm will not work here. But see, here also we have negative costs. Look at this example, again we have negative cost. Yes?
So, in this example, we are focusing
Where
on
are
local.
you? I can't locate you.
Sir.
Yeah, yes.
We are focusing on local optimal, so that we are violating the optimal substructure. Greedy you are following, na? So that greedy is local optimal. So, from S to 2 is 6 if you go the direct edge, but if S to 1 and 1 to 2 is having the lesser cost. So, if we apply the greedy, then we are violating the.
No, it is not about the algorithm. What I am saying is that the optimal substructure property says that when you look at the optimal solution, if it consists of subproblems and their solutions,
So, if we
then
consider
they will
the
also have to
locally
be
optimal, then we are violating the optimal substructure.
yes. So,
if we apply the greedy,
all the sub problems will be also be locally optimal. Yes,
so that is the thing. So
that
if
is
we
not
apply the-
holding here.
Yes,
That is
why
not holding here. That is why this is
locally
not.
optimal is violating. Local optimal may not be global optimal.
It is not about local optimal or global. It is the
So if
optimal
you-
solution.
Yes, sir.
Whether you find it.
If our problem is reaching 2 from S to 2, then we have two paths from S to 1 and 1 to 2. So that is the solution actual we needed. But if we reach from S to 2 directly, it is giving you 6. So that is if
No,
we
it is
consider
again. Let me clarify one thing. It is not the algorithm that we are talking about. It is not what you reach when and where.
Okay.
What I am saying is that if you take the optimal solution,
Okay.
that is regardless of the algorithm, optimal solution is the optimal solution. It is the shortest path. Right?
Optimal-
How you arrive at that shortest path, I am not
Okay.
asking. If you take any part of the shortest path, if that is also a shortest distance between those two vertices, then it satisfies the optimal substructure property. Otherwise, it does not. Now, whether I use an algorithm in what way, that I am not talking about. I am just talking about this problem substructure.
Optimal problem substructure.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I am saying that, see, the Dijkstra's algorithm assumes that there is an optimal substructure property, which is very important, because otherwise we will not be able to use Dijkstra's philosophy in other domains, and we will see a few of them in a short while from now. Okay? So, moving on, you see, it is not the case that whenever I have negative costs, I have a problem. So, if you look at this example, here when I freeze the value of 2 here, that is not a problem, because when I take this path, then it is 8 minus 1 7. So, it does not really decrease the cost of 2, right. So, there is also this problem of whether the costs gets revised monotonically or not, which is another factor which determines whether it will eventually get you the optimal solution or not. But this is a very difficult thing to verify in practice, and there are when you look up things like heuristic search, there are ways in which you can qualify the heuristics based on whether they are monotonic or not monotonic. There you do not care whether it is negative or positive or what, monotonicity is what you go by, and then you can prove all these properties based on that, right. That is a little bit different, not conventionally taught in an algorithms course, but you are saying that can I bring a node back after its cost has frozen and bring it back, right?
Then go back to 1.
Yeah, if you do that, then what you are doing is you are basically revisiting the nodes, right? Then your order n square or order the complexity, the polynomial time complexity which Dijkstra enjoys will be lost, and that we can show that if you re-expand nodes, then you do not get that complexity anymore. Yeah. Oh, you mean if you go round and round? No. So, the definition of a path says that you cannot repeat vertices. It is not a shortest walk, it is a shortest path. Okay. Right. Now, this I have already said that the optimal substructure property is an important thing. Let us move into another problem, where we are going to put what we have learnt into test. So, this is a problem of transporting eggs on a truck from one city to another city using a road network, and let us say that that road network is India's road network. So, you are almost certain to break a fraction of the eggs, right, and let Wjk denote the fraction of eggs that get broken if the truck traverses the road segment Jk, right. So, you have a set of yes. So, these are my cities, and these are the roads connecting these cities, and I want to go from some city S to some city T, and corresponding to each of these cities or the roads between them, I am given this Wjk, where this is the city J, this is the city K. That is a fraction of eggs that are broken when I take the truck from city J to city K through that road. Now, my goal obviously is to transport the eggs from S to T with minimum amount of breakage, right. So, firstly I will show you that this is not exactly the shortest path problem, and that we can see by taking this example. Let us suppose simple example. So, I have C, I have A, I have B. Suppose these are the fractions, right? Now, if you just look at it from a and let us say this is my S, this is from where I want to start, and this is where I want to end. Now, if you look at it from the shortest path perspective, then both have the same cost, right? 0.1 plus 0.1 is 0.2 and this is 0.2. But now, if you say that we start with 100 eggs here, then how many eggs will remain here? 90. And then how many eggs will I get here? 81. And how many eggs will I get if I take this one? They are not the same. So, how are we going to solve this? Can we solve this using a philosophy similar to Dijkstra's? What is the path cost? How can I compute the path cost? Path cost here is not the sum of edges. It is not the sum of edge cost. It is something else. Can we formulate this as a in a recursive way? Suppose we define du as the minimum. So, I am looking at the Dijkstra style of saying things. So, when I mean by du, it is the distance of u from the source node, right? Because in Dijkstra's algorithm, we will find the shortest path tree, where for each node I will label it with the distance from the source node. So, du here is minimum fraction of eggs broken in reaching u from S. So, then what is, how can I write du? In terms of a neighbor v of u nu is the set of neighbors of u, then what will this be? dv what am I asking here? That I want to reach some source node from some source node to some node v. I already know this is not an edge, this is a path. So, this is the minimum fraction of eggs which I break when I go from S to V, right? And then I have this edge which takes me to u. What will be the fraction of eggs which is broken here, given that this is W of Vu? What will it be? Fraction of eggs broken up to V plus what is the additional fraction that I break? What is the fraction which is unbroken? 1 minus d of V, right? Times So, now if you use Dijkstra style algorithm, what will you do? So, at a given point of time, there are a set of nodes in your open list, out of which you pick the minimum one, minimum cost one, freeze its cost. Now, when you compute revise the cost of the other children, what is the function that you will use? This one, to update it. In the ordinary shortest path algorithm, it was just dv plus wuv or cuv, but here it is not so. There is a factor 1 minus dv which is getting multiplied with it. Now is the difficult thing. Try to prove whether this guarantees the optimal substructure problem. Does it guarantee the optimal substructure property? If it does, then it is a good candidate for using that Dijkstra's philosophy of. So, what do you have to prove? See, on the face of it, it seems to satisfy it, no? Because if I am going from here to here and I am breaking the minimum number of eggs, then between any two intermediate vertices also I am breaking the minimum number of eggs, right, or minimum fraction of eggs, not number, fraction, right. Try to work this out and then the TS can help you. Now, we look at a slight variant of this again, and you will be surprised to see how much things change if you make such a variant. So, this is a problem where the graph here is showing various cities in a mountainous region, and the edge costs are showing the maximum elevation of the roads that go from here to here, right. Now, there is a traveler who does not like traveling on very high altitude roads, and the traveler wants to find out how to go from S to T without, getting into high altitudes. Now, you see it is not a shortest path problem, because if it in the shortest ST path here is the graph S to 2 to 4 to T, because that has a cost of 14, and I think there is no other shorter path than that. But the maximum elevation on that path is 6. On the other hand, if I use this path, that is S to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to T, then the maximum elevation there is this 5. So, if it is the elevation that you want to avoid, then the best path is from S to T, right. So, what is the path cost? Is it the sum of the edge weights? Yes? It is the maximum. Yes, minimize, find the path which minimizes the maximum altitude on the path, where the maximum altitude is obtained by taking the max of all the edges on the path, right. So, now this actually reduces to a very well known problem. Can anyone say what problem this is actually? Yes, somebody I think said the answer. Hmm? No, no, not traveling salesperson. You don't have to visit all cities and all that. You just want to go from S to T. And you want to do that without getting into very high altitudes. And I completely sympathize with that gentleman who wants to avoid high altitudes. We had every time we go to the mountains, you know, they always beacon because of their beauty. For example, once we spent a vacation in Kinnor, which is in Himachal Pradesh. It's a heavenly place, and it's so beautiful. But my God, the roads leading to those places, they are really scary ones. And there are places where you have to take a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and always one of the wheels are on the air. You know? So, I mean, there is a very real requirement to avoid high altitudes. But that's not all. You know, this problem can have other variants. For example, if you think of these cities as cities in a desert, and the distances between them are these wets, and you want to find out what is the maximum amount of petrol tank that you have to keep with yourself, or maybe how much of water you need to carry with you. There you can refill the water when you reach a city. So, your goal is to find out what is the minimum sized water bottle that will carry you over the maximum stretch that you encounter in your thing. Again, that is a maximization problem. Or if you think of this as a set of computer networks, and these link weights are bandwidths between the nodes, and you want to find out what is the maximum bandwidth path from one node to another, so that you want to send all your packets to that particular path, right. Select the routing path for your packets based on the maximum bandwidth. Same problem, right. But what we don't probably see as very obvious is that this is the this is the minimum spanning tree problem. And how do we show that this is minimum spanning tree? Because if we can show this to be minimum spanning tree, then we have nice algorithms, and then we will see that one of those algorithms is actually Dijkstra's. Yes? So, look at this algorithm, which tries to do the same thing as Dijkstra's does. At every point of time, I pick up the one which has the minimum cost. So, here out of these two, the minimum cost is that of 1, and I freeze that. So, I say that to reach 1, the maximum altitude that I have to go is 4. And then how do we update the node costs? So, previously we would compare 6 with 4 plus 4, but now what we do is we compare it not with the sum of these, but with the max of these, and then we take the mean out of the two. So, for example, here it is the minimum between 6 and 4. Why 4? Because 4 is the max of this and this, right. That is why we take 4 and we take 6, and then out of the 2 the minimum is this. So, I say that if I have to reach the vertex 2, then the maximum altitude to which I will have to rise is 4, which is correct. And then it proceeds exactly like Dijkstra's does, except that the formula for updating the cost of the nodes has now changed from sum of the costs to the max of the costs, and then the mean between the alternatives that I have, right. Can you tell me what algorithm? This is Prim's algorithm, right? Because at every time you are that shortest path tree which Dijkstra's produces is the part of the spanning tree it is producing, and then you are finding out what is the minimum cost edge out of this, and you are putting it in. It's Prim's algorithm. Spend some time on this, you will get that this is exactly Prim's algorithm. But we still haven't shown that the problem that we talked about is actually the minimum spanning tree problem, because otherwise we might use this algorithm and following Dijkstra style prove that this indeed gives us the path that we are looking for, but how do we show that that is the same as the minimum spanning tree? So, there is an important property of a minimum spanning tree which all of us can immediately realize if we look at this figure, that take any partition of the vertices, right. Let q q dash be any partition of the vertices of the graph, and let E q q dash be the set of edges in the graph having one point on one vertex in the q set and the other vertex in the q dash set, right. So, here for example, the partition is S 2 and 3 is in one side and 1 4 and T is on the other side, right. And these edges like 1 S, 1 2, 2 4 and 3 4, these are the edges which are going over from the q side to the q dash side. Now, we claim that the minimum cost edge in this cut must belong to the MST. Why? No, I am not talking about algorithms. I am saying that that edge has to belong to a minimum cost spanning tree. Yes. Yes, but so suppose let us say, let us look at this example and say, suppose this edge, right, which is the minimum cost edge here? 4. So, one of these two, right. Suppose none of these two edges belong to the minimum spanning tree, right. Suppose none of these two edges belong to the minimum spanning tree, then can we find out a way of reducing the cost of the spanning tree? No? Okay, let us look at it in this way. Suppose none of these are in the minimum spanning tree. If I put one of these edges into the spanning tree, if I add this edge on the minimum spanning tree, it will create a cycle, because if you take a spanning tree and you take any other edge from the graph and put it into that spanning tree, then you will create a cycle somewhere, right. Now, that cycle is using some edge from this set, from this cut, otherwise how can this contribute to that cycle? So, if suppose I put in this edge and it is creating a cycle, then that means the cycle is moving from q to q dash here, but then somewhere it will again come back from q dash to q. Are you following what I am saying? Okay, let me try to make it more explicit. So, I have this set of vertices q, I have this set of vertices q dash, right. Let this be the minimum cost edge from q to q dash, right. Now, suppose it is not there in the minimum spanning tree. If we put it in the minimum spanning tree, it will create a cycle what will that cycle look like? That cycle will look like something like this, right? So, there must be some edge through which it comes back from q dash to q, right? If I remove this edge, it will again give me a spanning tree, right? Now, this had a cost of A, this had a cost of B, and because we know that this is the minimum, so we know that A is less than B. So, if we replace B with A in the spanning tree, we get another spanning tree of lesser cost, right. So, that tells us that in the cut that we get here, this cut, the minimum edge, cost edge will have to be there in the cut, right. How does that help in showing that this problem that we were talking about, finding out the minimum altitude path, that is actually reducing to the minimum spanning tree problem?
We are always taking only that crossing edge which has got the minimum elevation. That means when we are taking a particular edge from one partition to another partition, we are taking only that edge which has got the minimum elevation. So, always he has to move along the path which has got the minimum elevation.
Yes, that is true, but how do you show that that path is the one which is there in the MST? See, the thing that we are trying to show is that the path that you get by doing all this is actually the path which is there in the minimum spanning tree from one of these vertices to the other. Right? That is what we are trying to prove. Yes? Yeah, so essentially what we need to show is that if you take the minimum spanning tree path, then you cannot get a path which has a lesser elevation than that, right. So, what do I need to show? So, I need to take the path in the minimum spanning tree. Let us say that this is that path in the minimum spanning tree which takes me from S to T. Note that because it is a tree, there is only one such path from S to T in the minimum spanning tree, right. Now, what is the cost of this path? The maximum elevation among all these edges, right. Without loss of generality, let us say that this edge E is the one which has maximum elevation. Maximum elevation. I want to minimize the maximum elevation. So, if I look at this path in the MST, the cost of the path is the maximum elevation on that path. Now, I want to show that every other path will have a maximum elevation which is even greater than this, greater than or equal to this. That is, you cannot reach from S to T using any other path which has lesser maximum elevation, right. So, what do? We remove the edge E from the spanning tree. Yeah, would you mind if I just finish this and then I will take your question? Yeah. I remove the edge E from the spanning tree. What will that result in? It will partition the vertices into two sets, because if you take a tree and if you remove any edge from it, then it creates two trees, right. Some of the vertices are on this tree, some of the vertices are on the other tree. So, let us say that the vertices in this tree form Q, the vertices in this tree form Q dash, right. Now, what did we say? That any among all the edges which are going from Q to Q dash in the graph, they all have cost greater than or equal to E. That is what we just now showed, previous result, that all of these will have cost of at least E. That means that they will have something like E plus, E plus plus, E plus plus plus. I mean, I am just using this notation to say that they are all bigger than E, right. Now, if you have to go from S to T, you will have to take one of these edges, otherwise how will you go from Q to Q dash? You will have to take a bridge from this side to this side, right. If you take any of these, then the maximum elevation will be even more than E. So, therefore, the spanning tree path is the one which gives you the minimum elevation, where elevation is the max of the elevations on all the edges on the path, right. So, you see, if we just change the type of costs and the way that we handle them, then that completely changes the structure of the problem as well as the algorithms that we can then use to solve those problems. Right. So, this is again, this we have already seen, and then that is the Prim's algorithm that we have already talked about. High bandwidth routing problem, as I mentioned, it is the same thing, except that here instead of finding out the minimum altitude path like we did there, what do I want to do? The path cost will be, if I have a path from node A to node B and these are the bandwidths, then what is the bandwidth of the entire path? No. Bandwidth is like, capacity of pipes. If you connect pipes and you want to find out what is the maximum amount that can flow through these pipes. So, which is the determining thing, the maximum one, the fatter one, or the smallest one, right? The thinnest one. And the thinnest one is the one which has minimum bandwidth. So, actually your throughput will be determined by the minimum bandwidth link, right? So, now you want to maximize, you want to find the path which maximizes the minimum bandwidth, right? So, now it is inverted, right? It is inverted. Now, that brings us to a very interesting question. When we went from shortest path to longest path, in general, we went from a problem which could be solved in polynomial time to a problem which is known to be NP complete or NP hard. Now, when we go from a minimum spanning tree to a maximum spanning tree, do we suffer a similar problem, or they are of equivalent complexity, right? This is a very well known fact, and if you want clarifications on this, TS. Right. So, with that I come to the end of this first part of graph algorithms and handling of graphs in general. If you have any questions, I think a gentleman wanted to ask a question, I interrupted him. Yeah. Yes, if you can please use the mic. Yeah.
If you have selected the edge E as a part of that minimum spanning tree, and another edges E plus, E plus plus, E plus plus and something like that, they are not becoming a part of the minimum spanning tree. So, in order to prove E as a part of minimum spanning tree, first of all we consider E plus as a part of minimum spanning tree, and by proof of contradiction we will show how it's not a part of minimum spanning tree, and finally E is going to become a part of that.
Yeah, you can prove it that way also.
Yeah.
What we did was, we looked at it from this point of view, that we wanted to show, take the path in the minimum spanning tree.
Okay.
and then show that every other path will have at least that much of elevation,
Okay, sure.
if not more.
Yes, sure.
Right?
Thank you.